So are we behaving now? Is everybody ready? Can we finally actually behave? We got a YouTube lesson going down. So gather round. Let's get in here. Get your friends. Let's get in here. We got a YouTube video going down. And I'm actually really excited about this one. This one is going to be fun because I played a game of chess today that inspired this lecture. We should back up and let you know how we got to where we are. I won a game I got a winning position against a really strong player in 3 moves. And I looked up this opening in the database, and it turns out if you get the following opening on the board, and Twitch already knows what it is, B3, there is one line that you can play that wins in 3 moves with a 7.5% degree of accuracy. So 7.5% of the time, if you play the following sequence, you can actually win in 3 moves. And that alone is exciting. But what is perhaps even more exciting is that I started looking deeper into some of these lines, and I actually accidentally discovered a brand new gambit. And that's the part that I'm really excited to be sharing with you. So I don't know what's cooler, the fact that you can actually win chess games really quickly against really high-rated players, or the fact that there's a brand new gambit out there. And I don't know, are we going to have to name a new gambit? What are we going to have to do? But I played a game today, and I've done this now at least 9 times, and at least twice on stream. One interesting system, if the opponent does decide to play the Nimzo-Larsen Attack, is to play d5. And obviously they're going to be playing bishop to b2. That's the point. And from white's point of view, simply you're going to be playing e3 next and deciding what to do. Usually there's some dark squared stuff going on in the center. But e3 is definitely the next move in line. So the way it's not really a trap because it's actually a good move. But the move that keeps winning for me is this idea of bishop to g4. And perhaps now you can see why people would lose. Especially in bullet, this obviously seems to work. Because 9 times I've had opponents play pawn to e3. And I've actually done it twice on stream. I could show clips. I think it's a little bit mean to show clips of people doing this. I don't want to embarrass anybody. Only person I want to embarrass myself is me. I've actually had this position 9 times, and I've managed to win 7. Usually I'm playing higher rated opponents, but obviously this happens, and you win a queen. So that's really cool, but it's not really a one-move trick. The whole purpose behind this move is not just hoping that they're pre-moving. It's not just a bullet, 1 minute, goofy way of continuing. It actually has a very serious point behind it. And the main idea is, okay, if they don't play e3, the second move that you might be tempted to check out is knight to f3. And the point here is that black can equalize immediately, or at least kind of kill off the game and give white very little chances of winning by simply taking the knight. And this is actually the main point of this entire system. And the problem from white's point of view is, no matter how you take the bishop back, it's just not going to be easy to get winning chances. For example, most people are taking back with the e-pawn. And now black can, well, first of all, let's actually just take a look kind of at the pawn structure. We might be able to identify why this isn't so easy for white to get an advantage now. The biggest issue is if you just simply look at the queen side, how is anything ever going to happen over here? Like if white ever puts a pawn on d4, are you really going to be able to follow it up with something like c4, where this always gives black an option of taking? And white's either going to end up with an isolated d-pawn or hanging pawns, and that shouldn't be too terribly concerning. And on the other hand, you sort of do lose influence on the center by taking away from the center. And the only real way for white to get any chances over here on the king side would be if black somehow allowed after e6 the pawn to go to f4 and f5, start to take and then maybe get the other f pawn and start some sort of storm over on the king side. But black can very easily counter this. The most popular move here is e6. Let's Some people like to avoid playing here, on the concern that perhaps white would be willing to do to black what has already happened to us and double the pawns. I would doubt from white's point of view you'd really be wanting to take the knight, but either way, the basic setup, the simple setup for black is after e6, any sort of moves, the bishop's not really going to make sense on this diagonal, and that's another problem. This guy doesn't really have a great home, but if you're going to be playing this move in the future, most players are going to put the bishop on g2. So for example, knight f6, bishop to g2, and black is obviously doing fine. You can just get the stuff out, you can get castled. This is totally a fine approach. But knowing that white's only real plan is simply to go f4, f5, a lot of players with the black pieces have just decided to play g6. This is actually the most popular move, taking away basically the only real plan left available to white out of the position. And from here, let's just say they castle, bishop g7, if f4, we castle, and things are totally fine. There are, somehow maybe this knight, what white will try to do is maybe maneuver knight over here, but there's not like a whole lot going on. It's not super easy for white to create serious chances of winning this game. Normally they're deciding between d3, d4, even c4 has been played. One interesting idea too, one interesting thing that is interesting about this position, I guess, there is a little trap. If they decide right now, normally because as black you don't want to open both the doors. We got both the doors open. One of the reasons you don't want to do this is because whichever way your bishop goes out, there's a weakness on the other side of the board. But here, if bishop to a3, which seems pretty logical, bad arrow, but it seems logical to prevent castling, black has a pretty interesting move here. So this is not good for white, but it's because of the move pawn to c5. And this sets a clever little trap. We are here live on Twitch, so if you're watching on YouTube, you can come and follow me. But I'll give the Twitch audience here a chance to get engaged. Did we just blunder a pawn? c5 is a very interesting move here. And while you do that, we'll take a sip of tea. Okay, so already it's been found. Knight e4 has the same idea. This is the move that we were hunting down. This is clearly the safest way. Played by AMC Donald. And a lot of other people are saying knight to e4, so we should take a look at that as well. But this is clearly the safer way of doing it. You're not hanging the knight. You're doing a revealed attack on the rook while also attacking the bishop at the same time. So many people have spotted it. Knight to e4, I guess, they can just sack an exchange. Is, I guess, maybe the reason. At minimum, maybe they can go here. And if you take, the bishop might even get trapped. You got to worry about c3. You also got to worry about pawn takes e5. So the safest and perhaps better way of playing is just to drop this knight back, which is weird because normally you think of you want to develop this guy, but you want to do the revealed attack on the rook. It's going to be winning stuff right away. And then if you can't take right away, we'll defend it next. We'll get castled. We'll be fine. So yeah, that's kind of an interesting variation. Also, white can decide back in this position after you take the knight, maybe knowing that it's not so easy, maybe they'll take a little bit more dynamically. They take with the g-pawn, taking towards the center, and perhaps gearing up in the future. Maybe now I have some play. Maybe I can play e4, play a little bit more dynamically. Still, this makes total sense for black, and you can actually play the exact same way. You can start with e6. After something like e3, white is still going to have kind of the same plan of playing f4, putting the bishop on g2. You just play very much in the same exact style. They have played a couple moves here, but the basic structure that you're going to get, again, you can play g6 with similar tricks if they try to play bishop to a3. You get this structure one way or another. There's a couple different ways of getting here. Maybe this bishop's not quite going to go here yet. Where it's not going to be super easy for white to break through. And this is very close to equal. Not a lot of chances. And again, white maybe has some ideas of going over here and going like this, but that's not the end of the world. But this is, okay, so this is kind of the reason, the problem, the purpose behind the move. So we play bishop to g4, and the point is if the knight comes here, we take it, and we get a fine position. So players have come up with a lot of interesting ways of combating this. Amongst those ideas, people have tried h3. This is actually the most common move, and this is the move that I face here most often. There's also like f3. There's even g3, and you just kind of ignore it and try to get your stuff out. You put the bishop on g2 to play knight f3. But h3 is what I've actually seen most commonly. But this always feels comfortable for black, because after you go back, the idea is they play g4. They force this guy out, and now you're not going to be able to take the knight if the knight decides to go to f3. But here, in preparation for this lecture, I discovered something about this position after bishop to g2. In the past, I've just happily been, bringing the stuff out, getting a good position. I've also had luck with this interesting and kind of offbeat knight to c6. But I was looking deeper down the list, and Pepega has actually hit on it. h5 is not a very common idea. So this position is been played over 6,000 times. And from this position, about 390 times h5 has been played in this position. So this is already a slightly unusual way to continue. But check this out. After g5, almost everybody plays h4 here. That's like the move. That's what people seem to do. People also try c6. People try all sorts of other moves. Maybe they try e6. I'm looking in the database. But there's a very fascinating move right here. What if you play, and this is not a true novelty yet, e5. e5. Tommy and Convert to RGB in the chat, figuring it out. And this has been played 17 times, if I'm adding numbers up right. So this is very rare. But this is a fascinating way. If you can put your pawns in the center, obviously that's what you want to do. And in this position, I have a novelty. So we sack a pawn. And it appears the move for black here seems very, very obvious. And some people have an interesting idea that I also kind of checked. Queen g5 is obviously the most obvious move. And then some people have other ideas, like playing d4. But I'm going to propose a slightly different move. I'm going to propose that we play knight to c6. But before we do there, let's look at some other choices. So let's start with the obvious. Queen takes g5 is obvious. If this wins a piece, then this is exactly what you would play. The problem, as spotted by Akim, you guys are on fire today. You guys are doing the whole lecture for me. Knight to f3, defending, attacking the queen. And if you take the bishop, rook to h2. And we can get out of this, but it's not good for black. It's not over. If we didn't just lose a queen, it's not just over yet. The best move here is actually to play bishop takes c2. And this gives us a way to escape with our queen. So after the queen takes, we can go back to g6. But this is kind of ugly. They're going to grab, we're going to take it back, and now we have, this stupid-looking structure that's going to get attacked pretty quickly. Our c-pawn is hanging. And maybe this is okay for black, according to a computer, but not the way I would like to live life as playing with the black pieces. So while possible, if white actually knows what they're doing and figures it all out, not necessarily the best. Some people have suggested playing a la Nozzle-Was with d5. But this suffers from a horrifically blunderific move that white can actually play in this position. And maybe now that the pawn is moved, people can see that we've actually given up this b pawn. So that's not going to cut it. So what we need to do is come up with a new solution here. Some people like f6. This is one I actually didn't look at. I don't 100% get it because the pawn was hanging, so we're just trying to give it up. And I guess your point is you want to take it back. You want to take it back with a g pawn or something? I don't know. I don't 100% believe this one. Knight takes, and we're down a pawn. I'm not 100% convinced based on the structure that we got going on over on this side of the board. Maybe it's interesting. Maybe in a real game you get some chances here. But I think even better is if we start with knight to c6. This is a novelty. Knight to c6, never been played before. Just discovered about an hour ago. And if you go back I'm assuming most players are going to go to f4. Because your bishop's attacked, your pawn is attacked, I assume most players are going to play bishop to f4. If you go back, now we can we actually get an advantage by taking on g5. And the position is a little bit different. White can definitely play the same exact way. Knight to f3. Where, for some reason, it's still possible to go in for this. I think the computer gave, like, you can still do this, and you can play exactly the same way. And it's like, you can do exactly the same thing, and it's like somehow black is a little bit better with the bishop here, rather than the bishop being active where it was attacking your c-pawn. But you get an advantage, too, just simply by grabbing the pawn, and if the knight comes out, moving your queen back, either to e7, going to d8. You're next up, you're just going to castle. And you got the pawn back. The structure on the king side is not super good for white. And, I don't know, black's a little bit better, definitely not uncomfortable. But what if white decides, I'm going to keep my pawn? I think this is probably the move, and this is actually the best move. This is the computer move. This is what most people are going to want to do. It would be interesting to see if you guys see the idea now. There is a slightly deeper idea, but this is good. This is bishop f4 is actually the best move for white, and it's like minus 0.5, minus 0.6. It's in that range. So this is actually a very good weapon for black. Bishop d6 is being recommended. I assume the white will just trade. We're down a pawn. We'll trade. We'll take back. We're a little bit more developed. Maybe there's compensation for a pawn. But we can do better. There's a much deeper idea, actually. All right. Once a stream, we'll point out just one Twitch idea. Twitch always has some pretty good ideas. But boom! Also, Daddy L. Cohen and Tomonome also have some pretty good ideas. Yeah, and you've nailed it exactly. Knight d4 with the idea of coming to e6. This is an amazing idea. So we're basically forcing, I don't see any other move for white except for d3. And we've provoked dark squared bishops. In a lot of systems, if you can provoke dark squared weaknesses and the bishop is on the other side of all these open doors, then boom, you're gonna get in a pretty awesome position. And here you can continue one of two ways. Knight e6, I think it's the easiest and most obvious, so that's probably what we should play to keep it simple. You can also play bishop to b4 first, provoking c3 and only then dropping the knight back. But either way, this is simplest. This is easy to understand. You drop the knight back and you're on the bishop. So if the bishop retreats or goes somewhere else, we're going to be just getting this pawn back and probably with a really good position. The greediest way I can consider for white is to possibly play something like e3, just with the hopes that if we do end up taking the bishop, he can take back. But here again, we can now take the time to throw this check in. We're trying to provoke the pawn coming to c3. Let's come back and look at queen to d2. If we do this line and we provoke pawn to c3, we can now just simply take here. Everything's hanging. They're probably going to have to take our knight because otherwise their bishop's hanging with check. They take our knight, we go back, and we're still down a pawn, but our pieces are going to be very, very, very happy. Also, if you take here, we can just give this check, castle, and just be down like another pawn. If not, we have plans of just getting this guy potentially in the future to the f5 square. Something like this is already very, very good. Let's continue down to the greediest path, because I assume this is what a lot of people will try. I don't know what people would do here, because if they go here, we can castle. We can just take this pawn right away. I think we can castle as well. I don't know. Looking at it live, I don't know why I wouldn't just take this. But castling also is a very sensible way of continuing. Even if you don't get the pawns back, it's always very good for black. The structure is pretty ragged and torn for white objectively. So what white should do is like develop pieces, because that's what you do. And we can protect our pawn, get our queen out, castle queenside, eventually use some of these squares. And this actually should work out pretty well for black. We had another suggestion in this position, so let's take a look at this one as well. It is kind of interesting to defend against Twitch chat to see what people come up with. So this is interesting because not only does it defend the bishop, but it also defends the pawn. So I think this is a wonderful way. My first temptation is to take the bishop. And after you take back, I'm probably playing bishop to d6. And I guess I'm a pawn down. Bishop to d6. And I'm going to cheat and use an engine. And this is minus 0.4. So this is what you want to do. You take the bishop to d6, and wherever it goes, black actually has an advantage. And the advantage is in the initiative, the better structure. But yeah, it goes like this, 97. Defend your pawn. And this should just be good for black. Yeah, excellent comp. I really do agree. So I thought this was cool. We're going to wrap it up here. I'm going to keep answering Twitch questions. So if you like this kind of lecture, let me know in the comments below. Come follow me on Twitch. I'm vampirechicken. Come and hang out. If you're watching live, and we got quite a few people here, go ahead and say hi. Say hi to YouTube. Tell them to subscribe. Tell them to come over here to Twitch. We've been doing tons of lectures over here. All of my novel ideas are revealed first on Twitch. So if you like it, I really have a goal. It'd be awesome to get to 20K subscribers on YouTube. We're like 400 away. If we can get there by the end of the year, that'd be awesome. And until then, we'll see you for another lecture.